Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Edward Scissorhands. So, gotta say, I enjoy this movie. Really, I went on, and I want to give credit to where credit's due. I stumbled upon this channel like the day before, or the day before the day before. And so all of a sudden, like, I just started like commenting on the videos because, like, oh, okay, this is cool, this is nice, this is interesting. And so all of a sudden, like, the person on the channel like started to respond back, and then all of a sudden they just like started to just like have this like just this conversation, just this rattle off of things. Even while I was possibly going on and doing videos during that time period, because I was just like, hey, like, this is cool. Like, normally I don't take a lot of days off, so like, I'm just kind of doing things while I'm also just having conversation. And so Aria C, I hope I'm even pronouncing that correctly. I went onto this channel, and like, Edward Scissorhands just came up through the discussion, and it seems like she's going to go on and possibly do a video on Edward Scissorhands soon. And so I was like, hey, okay, like, all right, um, like, I haven't seen that movie in I don't know how long, and like, I only remember like bits and pieces of it. So like, I thought I would go on and rewatch it and just kind of get my thoughts on this. So I gotta say, easily, I'm always won over by Tim Burton visuals. Really, that's my reasoning for always enjoying like the Batman Michael Keaton era, was simply because of the visuals and how like dark and gritty that they were, and how I can always go on and enjoy a Tim Burton film just because like the visuals are just so like out of the norm, and so interesting, but then also has that, like, again, that like dark and gritty kind of feel. It is kind of interesting when we have this movie also, because like, it feels like this movie is to have like kind of very also just the classic Tim Burton kind of like, how we had so many movies go on and have just like this kind of thing being put into a film, kind of much more seen in like Batman Returns, and going on to into this movie where it's just like like, now we don't even go on and really do much with like soundtracks as far as movies goes. It's just kind of fusing random songs, or it's just going on and having no real music whatsoever, or it's just goofy music that is to just have been like elevator music that got just piped into a movie, and it doesn't really make any much sense anymore. But so, Edward Scissorhands, we come to find a man who isn't possibly even a man. He may be more of a machine who is to never grow old. And Edward is to go on and is to be left within this home all alone to just like fend for himself. And so we have an Avon salesperson. I don't even know if Avon is still an existing thing. And so Peg is to just go from door to door to door, and even so, she is to just go to Edward Scissorhands' house, not really caring about that if it's haunted or anything. Peg just wants to go on and sell somebody something because she's just in desperation, because no one is really at all interested in what she has to sell. Peg goes to Edward's house and is to follow the shadow of him to then find him and say like, oh, like, well, I guess you're by yourself here. Well, like, come on over to my house, and here's some new set of clothes, which he just like tosses over his clothes that he's already wearing, and then he just continues to wear the exact same clothes for a number of days. modifying at some point because overalls eventually break. But in the whole entire time, we're having this character wearing all of this leather, and I'm like, man, how is this guy even to pee or take a dump? As well as him also just having scissors for hands. In my brain, like, just things are just calculating that should not be calculating because it's pointless. So now going on, Edward is to try to find his way to fit into this community by chopping up kind of bushes or shrubbery and whatever to carve out actual pieces of art, like a dinosaur or a family, a number of things, to where all of a sudden everybody's like, wow, that's very interesting, to the point of Edward is to go on and change from cutting shrubbery to cutting people's hair, or at first cutting dogs' hair and then cutting people's hair, and then going on and chiseling away ice sculptures and like doing all these really interesting things. So currently this is available on Disney Plus, if I didn't already mention. And what would be the grading of this film? So I would honestly say that this movie is honestly just a good film. I would say the fact that I feel like this character like is to go like and have this kind of like hill of a story where like we have like him kind of being nobody, somebody, nobody, and we have to at some point see that turn. And with the guy who has scissors for hands anyways, we would also like get to a point where you would think like somebody at first would think that this guy is a monster, but very rare amounts of people in this town go on and say anything like that, unless we of course have Esmeralda, who is to consistently say that Edward is some kind of devil or demon or whichever. And then Edward at some point is to get even with this woman, and I found that to be hilarious. So with that said, so definitely check this out if you haven't already. Within Disney Plus, it seems that bizarrely, this movie, by the time that of which I was to go into it, was oddly enough on a trending at some point of Disney Plus, which means nothing as far as trending bars goes. Because anything that is to be trending, like I don't know how many times, like I'll go through Netflix, like after a certain number of hours, and 20 different things will be like differently just placed on there, to where it's like, oh hey, here's randomly this now, hey, here's randomly that, and like man, like Netflix is never as trending as it like consistently trending as it used to be. It's freaking all over the place, and it's crazy. Why are you looking at any of the trending stuff? Like that's not the way to do a thing. Like I've gone on and I've kind of pulled away from that because of how much it starts to just be a waste of time um to where I'm just much more tempted into going on into a lot of stuff that I just find enjoyable and I want to showcase to the world at some point, because more than likely they've probably never heard of a number of things that at some point I've reviewed. So, with that said, let's go on into that double five time territory, because it's about that time yet again to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil this movie. So, I am probably not going to go in exact order of film because I stubbornly don't like to do it that way. I just like to have a certain way of an approach of things, and you can go on and watch this movie and just be like, yeah, that scene wasn't exactly the way the witch that he was to say, because I was to probably paraphrase. And at the end of the day, stuff is said. So, with that said, let's go into spoilers. In the beginning of this, we have Kim, who is to be an old granny who's going on and talking to, I guess, her grandkid, which I'm not quite sure how exactly she went on and had that grandkid, but story. So, Kim is to be telling her grandchild this story of her once going to this home that was to have Edward Scissorhands. So we now have it where Peg is to go on and be this Avon salesman, and she's going through a number of neighbors. She's going to Helen, she's going to Marge, she's going to any woman who is to possibly want to go on and buy makeup from her. We have Helen going on and telling Peg that Helen was never go on and want to buy things from Peg anyways, so why is she trying now? So Joyce, of course, is wanting to have a dishwasher repairman come to her place simply so she can try to seduce him. As this repairman is to easily realize that Joyce can go on and easily repair this kind of stuff herself, but Joyce is going on and mentioning, like, well, like, I notice how lonely so many repairmen are, and maybe you don't know how lonely certain women are, and this and that. So, as Peg is to come knocking on Joyce's door, Joyce is to be, like, rudely interrupted by Peg. So, Joyce is to go on and tell Peg that she is busy with company and that she can't go on, or she doesn't want to go on and hear a thing that Peg is to sell. So, Peg is to finally stumble upon this disheveled abandoned house that everyone, I guess, is to say at some point is haunted. And so Peg is to come knocking on this door, and Peg is to open this door, trying to follow a person through this house that she can kind of barely or rarely see. And so Peg is to go on and just continue to make her way all the way through this kind of very disheveled and torn apart house where there's a hole in the roof. And so Peg is to meet up with Edward Scissorhands, who, of course, is to be hiding in the shadows. And so Peg is to introduce herself to Edward, and so come to find out Edward has come out of the shadows, and she, of course, is to realize that this guy is to have a number of scars upon his face, and so Peg wants to consistently, throughout this entire film, come up with some way of trying to whittle down these scars upon Edward's face with this makeup concoction. So, I don't know how many times throughout this film, not only does Johnny Depp have to go on and wear, like, pale makeup, but then he also has to go through so much, like, makeup and all of this stuff that is just all over his face. And I'm just like, man, just, you gotta think that, like, what was going through just Johnny Depp's head throughout this entire movie? Was it like, what did I get myself into? I hope I don't cut myself. Thank God I don't have many lines in this movie, because thank God. It probably was an easy ordeal for Johnny to just like, wait, I could go on and like rarely ever say a thing, and I can just sell via the way I look, and that's it? Sign me up! So Edward is to go on and is to be given clothes by Peg, and Edward is desperately trying to figure out how to put these clothes on without actually cutting them. And we find Edward is to consistently need assistance one way or the other. And at some point, some people do help him, and other times they just like to just see him struggle and squirm. And like having Edward not being able to get any piece of silverware to be able to eat dinner, and then is trying to desperately go on and use like his scissored hands to try and pick up a pea. And she's like, and like just so he can like, man, does he really have to like work for his food in this film? It's awful. But then at some points we have certain people that are just kind of handing him things so that way he can consume. And I was like, oh, thank God. um like, yeah, like I'm just thinking in my brain, like, how is it that like Johnny Edward has to go on and not only have all this leather on, but then these clothes on. How is he to pee? How is he taking a dump? Um, like that seems like horrible that this guy's wearing this like leather all of the time. And like you would think the guy would just like walk around without clothes on, or would just have like the most minimal like tank top and like possibly like shorts or something, and like that's he would just walk around in that, and he would eventually get some suntan. Uh, what am I talking, right? So we have Edward that while he is to try to understand things like a waterbed, and Edward accidentally pokes into the waterbed and the water starts spurting out, and so Edward just takes this stuffed doll and is to put it into the whole place, and he's just like, okay, like hopefully no one sees this. So Edward is to somehow or another consistently just kind of cut into him at points, and Peg is to try to eventually kind of dab in certain areas to just kind of help him out. So while Edward and Peg are making their way to this home, we have the whole entire female neighborhood of things that are going on and making all these calls to all of these neighbors, who are, of course, women. And so when Peg is to make her way back to her answering machine, she realizes that it's like filled to the brim with all of these messages. And here's the thing, like, we just have Edward Scissorhands and he looks the way he does, and like there's just women in this movie like throwing themselves at him, and I'm like, god dang. Like, friggin', well, it's Johnny Depp though, but still, because women just love Johnny Depp. Freaking, like people just, or women just, even men swoon over Johnny Depp. So either way, like, even though like Johnny in this movie looks the way he does, still it's Johnny Depp. So they're like, ooh, swoon. So. But yeah, women are just throwing themselves at him. Even Renona Ryder, who is Kim in this movie. So Edward is to eventually meet with the family, and is to have like meet with Bill the dad, and Kevin the son. And so we have Edward that is to go on and is desperately trying to get some kind of food, and is to kind of like hit butter with his kind of hand knife, and is going on. The funniest thing is a later part of the film when one of the girls is to not want some cut of meat from Edward because she doesn't quite know if the meat that he's cutting, like with his scissor hands, is sanitary or not. And so I was like, well, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. It's a good thing that they brought that up. But so I thought that was like the real funny thing of this story. So Edward is to go on and is to go to bed one night, and all of a sudden we have Kim coming back with Jim from this van, and Jim, of course, is to have these very strict parents, and it seems that he like his home is like security alarm to the gills, and like he's not going to be able to make his way back into the house because like he should have gotten back into the house at a certain time while his parents were home, and so on and so Jim is to realize that his parents is rich, and he's just so tempted to want to take something from them because of how like really strict they are, and like he has just a lot of problems with his family. And so we go on, and Kim is to make her way back into her house and into her room, to come to find Edward is now there. Kim is very like unaware about this character who is sleeping in her waterbed, and again Edward is to scissor through this bed, and now like water is just spouting out everywhere. Kim is to be frightened, scrambling to her parents like, oh my god, there's a killer in the house. And so we have Peg, and we have of course Bill, who's to convince Kim like, oh no, like that's the guy that like we met up, and like he's gonna live with us now. And Kim is like, okay. But he's so weird, so Kim goes on, and while both Bill and Edward are having, I guess, some lemonade, and I guess the lemonade is like absurdly strong, to where now Edward is just kind of like like you can just see it in his face. It's like he's been like punched in the gut with the thing that he's drinking from off of this straw. And Kim and Peg come down, and they're to have like a proper introduction. And Kim is like, well, hey, yeah, I'm Kim. And we have Edward, who's like, it's just like he has his straw still in his mouth. So we then go on, and Peg was to go and spot, while she was making her way around the grounds of Edward's home, that there was a number of just garden sculptures and stuff like that of certain animals and certain dinosaurs and interesting things like that. And so Edward, while outside, was starting to just kind of carve up these certain things, making dinosaurs and making like a whole family. All of a sudden we have Esmeralda, who is to be kind of barging into the backyard, and is to say that Edward is the devil. He's the devil. And it's like, why? Because he dresses like Marilyn Manson? How is it all of a sudden he's a devil? Did he murder anybody? Like, so, but I guess because he's technically not a real boy, because we'll get into this. So, we have, of course, where we have flashbacks, where we have the inventor, who is Vincent Price, who is to have this certain assembly line of all these kind of cookies made, where we have these certain kind of robots that are kind of plopping with their feet to make these certain cookie designs. And so the inventor is to go on and pick one of these heart cookies, and is to take this heart cookie and put it right next to this robot, and just be like, this is an interesting idea. So, come to find out, the inventor at some point was to be reading to Edward like this bedtime kind of story. And at first he is to just kind of like read him this like very odd like book. But then he goes on and reads him like this poetry from from this also very dark book. So at some point, we have the inventor who is to perfect Edward with the exclusion of his hands. And so the inventor is to finally, as a Christmas present, because technically this movie does tie into Christmas. So for any of you who want to go on and see this as a Christmas movie, go on ahead. I think also Batman Returns was a Christmas movie also, because of course it is, from what I remember. So the inventor is to give Edward the gift of these hands, and Edward is looking at him. He's like, "Oh, hey, yeah, like this is great," and I'm kind of wondering if like these are actually the doubles of Johnny Depp's hands that they might have gone on and used to try and figure out like how to do these scissor hands and how they'll work. So all of a sudden, while the inventor is just kind of looking on as Edward is to just be in amazement about these hands, all of a sudden we have the inventor who's just kind of like, and like it just feels that all of a sudden he is like struggling with something. He falls to the ground, and Edward tries to go on and touch the inventor's face and kind of cuts into him a little bit. But I guess at some point Edward was to go on and bury his inventor and just continue to live here, unless the corpse at some point just decayed where it was. So wouldn't that have been a thing that they should have somehow shown in this movie, of how he was to bury this guy? That probably would have been weird. So, but Edward is to go on, and he is to have the whole neighborhood want to go on and do this barbecue, or like this house party. And so when like all the girls in the neighborhood want to go on and do this house party, and like all the girls are telling Peg like, well, hey, like what time should we be expecting you at this house party? And Peg is like, what are you talking about? It's like, well, you have a new man here, like we should go on and have this house party. So Peg is like, well, I guess. And so they're scrambling, trying to get everything together, and we have a bunch of the people chiming in. Marge is mentioning that she wants to go and give coleslaw and all these kinds of things. So everybody's putting everything together. So we have it at this kind of house party, and so Edward is at some points getting fed things, and we have Joyce, who is to kind of want to pounce upon this man for possibly how deadly he could possibly be. So Joyce is to try to give Edward a spoonful of this food, and so all of a sudden all the other women in the neighborhood are starting to go on and want to feed Edward things. And so Edward is to go on and just be a hit with the neighborhood. And so Edward is to go on, and like people are to realize like, oh my god, like these tree or these bush trimmings are just amazing. So Edward starts going on and doing that all throughout the neighborhood. And all of a sudden we have one time when Edward, after he was to go on and trim one of these trees, he all of a sudden, or trims one of these bushes, he then turns around and is to see this dog, and he trims up this dog. And we of course have the owner who's like, oh my god, like I love this is amazing. And so all of a sudden Edward is now a dog groomer, and he's starting to go on and just trim up all of these dogs. Not quite sure about exactly like the perfect visuals or the perfect trimming of any of these animals, but still, they are what they are. And so, once Joyce is to bring in her dog to get groomed or get trimmed up by Edward, Joyce is to go on and ask Edward, it's like, well, hey, like, would you ever like cut like a woman's hair? And Edward is like, So Edward is to go on and start trimming up all of these women's hair, just going for it. And we have these very like unique hairstyles and these really cool looking things that technically fit like certain people and whichever. Like I just remember the one like kind of horned freaking hairstyle that might have been Esmeralda that might have gone on and done that. Maybe. But man, like that was funny. So everybody's getting their hair cut, and like we have we go on and we have, of course, Bill and Peg with the idea of like, well, hey, like you should get your own like salon. Like everybody is crazy about it. And so when Kim is back, Kim is to start having like Jim come around fairly often, and Jim is consistently making fun of Edward, just going on and like calling him any cluster of names here. So Jim is to even be invited to dinner where he rattles on about his parents and how they're of course really just very difficult or very like certain about things. So we have it where here's where they come up about Edward possibly owning a business and owning a salon. And Edward's like, well, yeah, like maybe I can go on and be able to uh, figure out how I can talk to a bank to get a loan for this business. So Edward is to make his way to this bank, and the bank, of course, is to mention like, well, like this guy doesn't even have like a social security card, and so I don't think there's any way for us to justify like giving him anything. So Edward now is to realize that it's like, well, like I guess I won't do a salon then, as we still have Joyce who is tempted to kind of pick out this salon building for Edward to go and have these certain uh, kind of like cloths or whatever that will be draped over people's chests and what have you. So Joyce is to go with Edward to this salon to have her showcase some of these fabrics. And we then turn around and have Edward, who is to then be seduced by Joyce, having Joyce start to cut into some of her pieces of clothing, and all of a sudden, both Joyce and Edward are to fall out of this chair, and Edward starts running off, maybe because possibly he is not used to this kind of behavior or not really used to being able to do this kind of act. And so he runs off, and Joyce is to run after him, saying like, hey, you can't do that, Edward. So now here's where we start to have things fall apart. So Edward is to go and meet up with Kim and Jim, and it seems that Kim and Jim are having problems getting into this door, and so Edward is to use his little scissor hand to open up this door, just kind of pick the lock, and Jim is like, like, so, like, there is a use for you after all, kind of thing. So Jim in his brain is concocting a plan that he wants to steal money from his own parents, which doesn't make sense, so that way he can afford a van for him and Kim. And Jim is telling Kim, it's like, well, don't you want a van, Kim? Don't you want a van? And Kim is like, well, yeah, I guess. And so Kim is to go on and ask Edward to do this caper with them. And so Edward is happy to oblige because Kim was to ask. It wasn't anything about any number of these other people. It was all just about, of course, Kim here. So, but we have also Edward, who is to do like so well with what he's doing with all the hair and gardening things that he is to go on and do. Edward is even to make it on a talk show where we have this TV host that is starting to ask like a number of people questions like, hey, how do you feel about this Edward Scissorhands guy? And so this TV host is go around and a number of people are asking, it's like, well, hey, like, if I were to let you know of a hand expert, like, would you want to go on and see this person? And Edward's like, well, I'm sure I would. Like, that's great. So now there are people are like, well, if your hands go away, do you think that you won't be special? And Peg is like, well, he'll always be special. So we have it at one point where one woman is to stand up and like, well, do you have a girlfriend? And they're like, ooh. It's like, and so when Edward is to answer from the microphone, all of a sudden he ends up like cutting the microphone and getting electrocuted. And he's like, ah! And he freaking falls out of the chair. And Jim starts laughing like crazy as Kim is like, hey, like, don't do that. Like, he hurt himself. And Jim is like, well, yeah, like, man, I wish I could have taped this because I would watch this 100 times over. So Kim's like, no. And so we start to see like the change in Kim going on from like at first just kind of being afraid of Edward to slowly but surely just kind of being curious about him to then all of a sudden, like when Kim was to see Edward on TV with that hairstyle of which that he was to have, Kim was like, you know what, there's something about this guy. I just don't quite understand it yet, but there's just something about him. This kid's going places. Maybe not a whole lot of places, but places. So now we have the caper. So Edward is to go on into this house to follow a number of people. And so Edward is to pick this lock to make his way into this home. And so what ends up happening is they start to go into this home. All of a sudden this alarm kicks in. And Kim, Jim, all the other buddies that they were to have all scramble out of this house. And the door is to be closed like behind them, leaving Edward just stuck in this house. And he, of course, has the inability to open this door. He was stymied by a door. This is Sheldon from Big Bang Theory all over again. Would you be a lamb and open the door? He's a lamb. You're not. So we have it where Edward is to be stuck in his house with this baseball cap. And I think that's probably the best version, weirdly, of Edward Scissorhands, is just baseball cap Edward Scissorhands. He looks really cool in his outfit and getup and whatever. So Edward is to, of course, be, shall we go to jail? Because that's, of course, forcibly where he's going. We have this Officer Allen that is to have booked Edward. So Edward is to go on and be eventually a front of a judge. And we have this psychologist that comes in and he's like, well, it seems that Edward was to never be developed in knowing what's right and what's wrong. and that more than likely, like, this man could possibly, uh, like, not know the danger that he is to, like, uh, that he is to possibly have, and so on and so. But come to find out, we have it where the officer Allen is asking the psychologist as well, like, do you think that we should condemn this man? And the psychologist is like, well, no, I don't think so. So they let Edward go, and so now we just have Peg and we have Bill that is consistently grilling Edward for doing what he did. Edward probably could have went on and snitched on all of the people, all Jim and Kim, and that they were to ones to uh, persuade or manipulate Edward into doing this, but they never actually said that. But at some point, Kim goes on, and I believe she does confess or want Jim to. And Jim was like, no, like, I'm not going to tell anybody I did anything. No. So after Jim and the Kim situation with leaving Edward behind, Kim is no longer interested in Jim. And so we start to slowly but surely start to see some aggressive natures of Edward, because at some points he is to start to get a number of people within this community start to distrust him or start to like not see his side of things. They're to just see like, oh well, like Joyce is to mention that she was actually like taken advantage of by Edward, and a lot of people are just kind of spilling gossip of like, well, yeah, like he's a danger to this neighborhood and so on and so forth. Like, how could they have let him out? And so like really, like, we could have gone on and had this been like washed away as a simple misunderstanding, because like Edward doesn't know any better, and like there could have been a whole justification for this if Edward would have accidentally like broke into like someone's house just by knocking on a door, like a scissors go in or a thing goes in, and like mistakes can happen. But so we have now all the people at the dinner table, and Edward is kind of scissoring away at this meat, handing it off to, of course, certain people like Suzanne, who is saying like, "Oh, I don't think that's sanitary. I don't think I can eat from him." And so Edward is to give this to Kim, and Kim is like, "Okay." So come to find out, the reasoning of which Edward was to go on and do that whole caper was simply because Kim asked him to. It was not to try to make friends. It was to not to like think that he can get something out of the deal. Like, it was mainly just so he can go on and help Kim. And so Bill was at the dinner table, and he was mentioning to Edward this choice of like, hey, you find a bag of money just in the middle of the road somewhere. What do you go on and do? Do you keep the money? Do you give the money to your family? Like, do you go on and turn the money into the police? Like, what do you do? And so all of a sudden, everybody around the table is starting to answer this question. And so, like, they're waiting on Edward's response. And so Edward's like, well, I think I would give it to my loved ones. And Bill's like, no, that technically isn't the correct response. And Kevin is like, well, yeah, of course it's not. You have to go on and give it to the police. Everyone knows that. But, like, Edward is just, like, out of that bubble of knowledge. And so, again, like, he just thought that giving it to his loved ones was possibly a correct answer, and Kim kind of backs him up on that. It's like, well, no, like that actually does seem like a reasonable answer. And so like Edward giving it to his loved ones to have them figure out like what to do with this money instead of having him figure it out, like that actually would make some sense. But like just kind of giving it away for them to just pocket it up, like that, like that can go on and just be kind of a slippery slope, because what's going to happen if somebody is going to come after this money, because I've seen a plethora of movies where that ends up just happening. But anyways, so the further and further we go into this movie, we have Edward, who is just becoming a pariah of this town, or just like a person who is to go on and more just be saddened by the neighborhood that he is to now live in. And Edward is going on and just ripping up uh, like certain uh, like walls, and clawing up uh, curtains and everything like that. Just going on and just clawing away a bunch of everything that he is to just get his hands on. And so we escalate matters with, of course, now Jim, who is brokenhearted by Kim, and Jim is now thinking that Edward is to be the reasoning for Kim wanting to break up with Jim. And Jim's like, wait a minute, like you want to go with that freak? You want to, like, you're dumping me for that? What? So Kim is to go off, but then eventually he comes back wanting to take care of Edward. And we have kind of Kim being in the scuffle of things, and we have Jim, who is just consistently choking Edward and trying to kill him. And Edward goes on and cuts slices into Jim's arm, which is seen by all the neighborhood. And like that's the only thing that people like retained, was like, oh well, Edward sliced into him, and nothing about Jim choking Edward. And so as Edward is to try and get up, all of a sudden he's accidentally starting to slice into other people, and they're like, whoa, all right, whoa. So we start to have like almost like a number of people who are like, get out of here, like and Kim is just telling Edward like he needs to run, because everyone is just looking at him as a monster, and Jim as this guy who did nothing wrong. And they don't know the whole side of the story. They don't know the whole context of everything. So Kim is to make her way back to Edward's home, because Edward just goes back to this home. And so we also had the one moment where Edward was to kind of scissor his way through this ice sculpture, and Kim was to be like kind of circling around this ice as if it's snowing, and is to be just basking in it. But like eventually that happens in this film, because they kind of go back to it at the end of this film, so I had to mention it. So Edward and Kim. So Edward and Kim make it back to this place, and Jim is to also still want to get even with this Edward, want to take him out one way or the other. So Kim is to make his way to Edward's home, seeking revenge. So settling this score. And so what ends up happening is Edward is to have to defend not only himself, but then also Kim. And so Edward is like, you know what, like this finally needs to end. So Edward just stabs into Jim, and Jim ends up falling through this window and he ends up dying. And so Kim, who was in attached to this love triangle, Kim was to go on and tell everyone in town that Edward and Jim killed one another off, and like the roof had caved in on them. So like just trying to figure out a way to write off Edward and to write off Kim or write off Jim, so that way no one else is going to be lynch mobbing or coming after anybody. So, and we had also Edward, who is starting to cut into certain people's uh, kind of people's artwork that is to be in front of their house. Like he cuts certain grassy people, and he is to find Esmeralda's place, and he is to trim this shrubbery into this devil looking thing. And Esmeralda's like, hey, what's that outside my window? And so she opens it and she's like, oh my god, it's a devil. Ah! So Edward is to go on and pop this tire and is to scratch all into everything. And so it was great. So after we go on and have Kim, who's convincing everybody now that Edward and both Jim are now dead, we now transition and we have Kim, who is to go on and is to talk to her grandchild, and like her grandchild is asking him, it's like, well, hey, like, have you ever went back to see Edward? And Kim was like, oh, well, like, I'm far too old now, and I'd like for him to remember me like I was instead of the way I am now. And so we cue up Edward back at his place, going on and just kind of doing all these ice sculptures of course, Kim just kind of doing that whole circle thing like before, and like just carving up all these things, of course, that he is to go on and try to like remember all of his past and so on and so forth. So kind of just reflecting on that whole time that Kim was to be in this circle of these ice chunks just kind of coming at her, and she was like, like, this is great. So just making it seem like there's snow when there actually isn't. So with that said, I think that does cover most of Edward Scissorhands. Let me know in the comments below if there's something that I forgot about, because there's probably something that there is. With that said, a lot of times, like, once we got to the back half of this movie, like, I was starting to, like, dialogue was really starting to fade in my brain noggin. So with that said, hopefully I can go on, and if I remember any little bit of something before this goes out for the day, then I will go out of my way to hopefully just be like, oh yeah, this and this, da 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 da. But I feel for the most part I've gotten most of this movie said, so let me know in the comments below how you felt about Edward Scissorhands. If you went on and just enjoy this movie, maybe it's your favorite film, and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, I think it's about time to just get out of here. Oh, we also had the moment where Edward was to go on and cut through his clothes that he was to have from Peg's home, to just have all like the leather outfit that he had before, and that was all that he had. And I'm like, well, yeah, like technically that makes so much sense, because for the character to have gone on and had this like kind of hill to go on, where he is to go back directly from once of which that he came, getting rid of those clothes from Peg's house was like the last thing to do. Because when he was to go on and be introduced into this community, he was to be introduced with those clothes. So with that said, I think I want to go on and just do another review. So I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.